This is DW News coming to you live from Berlin. It was a choice almost no one had expected. After days of torturous negotiations, European leaders nominate Ursula von der Leyen, Germany's defense minister, for the EU's most powerful job. But opposition to her is already growing, and the European Parliament has its own big decision to make. Our correspondent Max Hoffmann is covering the story.
Who will become the next president of the European Parliament? It is one of the top jobs in the European Union, and so far we have 4 candidates that have presented themselves to this house behind me, the Parliament in Strasbourg. The frontrunner is a social democrat from Italy.
Also coming up, an Italian judge releases the German skipper of a migrant rescue ship after she was arrested defying an order not to dock. But Italy's interior minister has called for tougher treatment and says he will expel her. Plus, England and the U.S. battle for a place in the Women's World Cup final. We'll go to Lyon for the highlights of a tense and dramatic match. Hello, I'm Terry Martin. Good to have you with us. After days of wrangling, the 28 EU member countries have agreed on their nominees for the top jobs. In a surprise move, the leaders nominated German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen for President of the European Commission. The conservative Christian Democrat was nominated to replace Jean-Claude Juncker after most of the frontrunners for the post were rejected. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel was one of the names being floated for the top job, but in a last-minute reshuffling, the Liberal politician was nominated to replace Donald Tusk as Council President. Well, International Monetary Fund Chief Christine Lagarde received unanimous backing, as the next president of the European Central Bank. If confirmed, the centre-right conservative would be the first woman to head the ECB. And Spanish Foreign Minister Josep Borrell has been put forward as the candidate for EU Foreign Policy Chief. The socialist would replace Federica Mogherini as the EU's top diplomat. But the biggest hurdle in this political race has still to be cleared. The European Parliament has to approve the lineup, and the Social Democrats have already set themselves against Ursula von der Leyen's nomination. Joined now by DW's Max Hoffmann. He's in Strasbourg, where the European Parliament is meeting today. So, Max, the ball is now in the EU Parliament's court. What do MEPs make of the nominees they've been given for the top jobs?
Yeah, Terry, you just said it. There's strong opposition, especially among the Social Democrats, that are hugely disappointed because of 2 things. First of all, they were very close to having the top job for themselves with their lead candidate, or Spitzenkandidat as it is called, Franz Timmermans. And the second one is that they've said all along, we will only accept somebody who actually was a lead candidate, a Spitzenkandidat, for one of the political groups here. And so especially the German Social Democrats, the SPD, are dead set against Ursula von der Leyen. And I asked their boss, Katharina Barley, who used to be the Minister of Justice in Germany, whether she would risk an institutional crisis by voting against Ursula von der Leyen. And this is what she had to say.
This is already an institutional crisis because the Council obviously ignores what the Parliament has stated clearly from day one, from long before the election, that we are only going to vote for one of the Spitzenkandidaten. That is what the Parliament and all the parliamentary groups have said all the time. So the Council has decided to ignore this, and that is already part of the crisis.
Obviously, the EU is having a tough time, Max, choosing its leaders, but how much of a crisis is this really?
Well, to be fair, none of those Spitzenkandidaten that Katharina Barley just mentioned would have had a majority here in this House in the European Parliament, and none of them had a majority among the leaders in the EU Council. So that's what made this crisis. But there are still 2 weeks' time. Ursula von der Leyen will have the time to try to convince the parliamentarians. Actually, she's coming here today to Strasbourg to do just that. First, she's going to talk to the Conservatives, her own party. But the opposition is so strong that it's not a done deal. It'll be tough for her to gain those votes. And if the European Parliament doesn't vote in favor of her, if she doesn't have a majority, then we're back to square one. And I think it's fair to say that then, yes, we have an institutional crisis.
Okay, there we were talking about the Commission. Now, let's talk about the European Parliament where you are. The European Parliament is voting on its own president today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there are 4 candidates, for example, from the Greens, another German, Ska Keller. But she doesn't have a lot of chances at the moment because what's happened is that this position is also part of that package deal that was concluded in Brussels yesterday. And so informally, at least that's what Donald Tusk said, the head of the European Council, this position right here is supposed to be social democratic. So the Social Democrats nominated an Italian former journalist for the position, David Sassoli, and he is the front runner because neither the Conservatives nor the Liberals have nominated their own candidate, so we expect them to vote in favor of the Social Democratic candidate to make this whole package deal work.
Max, thank you very much. DW's Max Hoffman there in Strasbourg. Well, let's take a closer look now at Ursula von der Leyen. If confirmed as European Commission President, the 60-year-old would become one of the most powerful politicians in the EU, certainly the most powerful in any EU institution. But as we have already seen, her nomination is not without controversy. And in her current role as Germany's defense minister, she has also faced many challenges.
She's considered a close ally of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Ursula von der Leyen, German defense minister, Christian conservative and long-time politician. A medical doctor and mother of 7, von der Leyen joined Merkel's CDU party in the early 90s. She later headed the Ministry of Family and Women before serving as Minister of Labour. As Germany's first female defence minister, von der Leyen aimed to revamp the armed forces. But she's recently drawn criticism for poor management in the ranks. Several scandals, including revelations of far-right extremists in the military, equipment failures and deadly military plane crashes, have plagued her tenure. A European at heart, fluent in both English and French as well as German, von der Leyen has long been seen as a possible successor to Merkel as Chancellor, or more recently as the next head of NATO. European leaders have now agreed to choose her as the next president of the EU Commission. If the European Parliament endorses her, she would be the first woman to fill the influential post.
Well, let's bring in DW's Hans Brandt, our political correspondent. Hans, so Germany's defense minister, Ursula von der Leyen, has been nominated to head the European Commission. What's the political reaction here in Berlin?
Well, the first reaction, frankly, was one of surprise when this name was first publicly aired sometime on Tuesday morning. Nobody really was reckoning on this woman becoming the head of the European Commission. There had been some talk that she might be interested in one of the positions of commissioner, in other words, something like a minister of some sort in the European Commission, but that she would get the top job, that nobody expected. When the surprise had kind of settled in, I think especially the Conservatives here in Germany were very pleased that this woman from their own ranks was going to, or was likely to be, the top politician in the European Union. And at the same time, her being a woman is also a significant signal to the world and to the voters. So also, I think, in the end, Angela Merkel is considered as having done a deal here, which once again confirms that she has significant influence in the European Union.
Now, Germany actually abstained in a formal way from voting on Ursula von der Leyen's nomination. Why?
The background to that is that Angela Merkel is not governing on her own. The Conservatives do not govern on their own here in Germany. They are in coalition with the Social Democrats. And as we've just heard from Max, the Social Democrats are very vehemently against the appointment of Ursula von der Leyen. They are saying that this whole process of election towards the European Parliament, which put forward this idea of top candidates being voted for by the voters. Now somebody's getting the job that has not stood for election, that has not been known to the voters, that has not presented herself to the voters, and the Social Democrats feel that that is undermining European democracy and therefore criticize it very strongly. Angela Merkel, as kind of taking into account this opposition, abstained from voting.
Hans, thank you very much. DW political correspondent Hans Brandt. Now, let's look at some other stories making headlines around the world today. At least 40 people died when an airstrike hit a migrant detention center in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Officials said another 80 had been injured. Libya's UN-backed Government of National Accord has blamed the attack on the self-styled Libyan National Army. It denies being behind the strike. Demonstrators burned tires and blocked roads across Israel to protest against the shooting dead of an 18-year-old Ethiopian Israeli by an off-duty policeman on Sunday. Activists have been angered by perceived systematic discrimination by police towards Israel's Ethiopian minority. Russia's defense ministry says a fire on board a deep-sea submersible has killed 14 crew members. Moscow said the vessel was surveying the seabed north of Russia, but local media reports say the vessel was actually a secretive nuclear-powered mini-submarine. The crew were apparently poisoned by fumes. The German skipper of the migrant rescue ship Sea-Watch has been moved to a secret location because of security fears. Captain Carola Rackete had earlier been released from house arrest by an Italian court. She was taken into custody on Sunday after taking her ship, carrying 40 migrants, into port on the Italian island of Lampedusa. In doing so, she collided with a customs patrol boat. The Italian judge said that Rackete was just doing her duty saving human lives when she docked the ship in defiance of Italian authorities. Our reporter Amian Esif is in the Sicilian city of Agrigento. He told us more about the reaction to Carola Rackete's release.
This is the apartment where Carola Rackete spent the past 2 days under house arrest. There was celebration here last night as the news came that a judge had ruled against an order to have her held in Italian jail. The judge said she was only doing her duty to save human lives when she disobeyed Italian police and brought her ship to port. The decision angered Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, who said Rackete will now be expelled from Italy. And despite the show of support here in Agrigento for a woman many Italians see as a hero, there is also widespread support for Salvini's anti-immigration stance. Many here don't see Rackete as a lifesaver. They see her as an agent of a foreign power, taking her ship down to the Libyan coast to pick up migrants and forcibly delivering them to Italy's doorstep. For them, Salvini is the hero, protecting Italy's so-called sovereignty, even at the expense of migrants' lives.
In many parts of the world today, it's International Plastic Bag-Free Day. The European activists behind this movement hope it will highlight the damage plastic waste is doing to our planet and persuade people to find other solutions. Here are a few shocking statistics. The world produces 300 million tons of plastic waste every year, just about the weight of the entire human population. 10 million tons of that end up in the world's oceans. A lack of effective waste management in Asia is said to be the biggest source of the problem. 90% of ocean plastic is carried by rivers, such as the Yangtze and the Yellow River in China and the Ganges in India. Well, much of this plastic waste degrades and breaks down into microscopic particles. You can see just how small they are. They are often ingested by fish and then eaten by humans. Our rubbish permeates our oceans, including here, the deepest place on Earth, 11 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean in the Mariana Trench. China announced 2 years ago that it would no longer accept plastic waste from other countries for recycling, and that's put pressure on other developing countries that have become destinations for dumping.
This is Canadian plastic waste that was supposed to end up in the Philippines. Right now, it's burning up in a Canadian incinerator. The government says it's being safely treated in line with national standards. The waste was sent to the Philippines years ago. Following a legal dispute, the government in Manila hired a shipping company to send it back to Canada. And this is what happens when Southeast Asian countries accept Western waste. Mountains of garbage from France, Germany, and other European countries. Items are used once and thrown away. Malaysian activists found this site next to a palm oil plantation.
We found the factory, they just dump the non-recyclable plastic or the reject product, and then they burn in the backyard of this factory. So those toxic fumes actually already cause a lot of health problem to our residents.
The problem has gotten worse since China stopped accepting waste shipments in 2017. Since then, millions of tons of waste have been shipped to Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Environmentalists have called on the countries to stop accepting waste. They also say the solution isn't just local. The producers of plastic also have to change their ways.
Plastic waste is a global problem, and we are killing ourselves by using too many plastic. We too depend on plastic. Please manage and handle your own trash. Don't dump to our country.
The European Union has promised to stop exporting its plastic waste to developing countries, but only in 2021. So for now, the trash mountains of Malaysia and its neighbors will just keep growing.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by DW's Tamsin Walker, who focuses on environmental issues for DW. Good to see you, Tamsin.
Hello.
A growing number of countries are banning plastic bags. Germany is not one of them. Why is Germany not showing leadership on this issue?
I mean, that's a question that I put to an Environment Ministry spokesman quite recently. His response was, Germany has such good waste disposal and recycling facilities that it doesn't actually need to have a ban. What they did a couple of years back was to introduce a voluntary fee under which retailers could say, OK, our customers will be asked to pay a nominal amount of money, 20 cents perhaps, to have a plastic bag. And they say that that has been fairly successful and it has cut the number of bags that Germans use by 2/3. So the average, now each year, the average German uses 24 plastic bags. But there are 80 million people in the country, you know. So
the government is saying that everything's fine, but you're an environmental journalist. You focus on this. Are things really fine?
Well, no. I mean, you know, the pictures kind of bear that out, don't they? No, it's not fine. And the other thing is that the predictions suggest that the amount of plastic that's going to be produced going forward is just going to skyrocket. You know, we're nowhere near the end of finishing manufacture.
What would it mean if a ban on plastic bags were to be implemented in Germany? Would it be, like, hugely disruptive?
I don't think it would be. I mean, I asked a whole bunch of people recently, shoppers, what would you do? How would you respond? You know, should it be banned? Most of them said, oh, yeah, let's ban it. One guy I went to, I said, how would you respond? Should Germany ban plastic bags? He said, absolutely, ban them, you know. And I said, but you're holding a plastic bag. And he said, yeah, but that's just because I can still have one. Ban them and I won't use them. OK, now the EU has recently decided to ban certain single-use plastics. Do you see this happening globally? Do you see a global ban on this kind of plastic bags, single-use plastics happening? I mean, there are definitely more and more bans coming into effect, but as I said, at the same time, production is increasing, absolutely unabated. I don't think that we're anywhere near an outright ban on single-use plastics. Tamsin, thank you so much. DW environmental correspondent Tamsin Walker. Thank you. Now, something else afflicting the environment, particularly in Europe right now, wildfires. The largest wildfire ever seen in northeastern Germany has finally been brought under control. For days, flames had been raging through the region, covering more than 1,200 hectares of open land and forest. Entire villages had to be evacuated, and firefighters worked around the clock. They finally succeeded this morning when the fire receded for the first time.
Our correspondent Tessa Walter is in the town of Luptin, close to the wildfire, and she's been covering this story from the beginning. Tessa, this fire was huge, and firefighters could hardly get near it. I understand they've brought it under control now. How did they manage to do it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have to keep in mind that still 800 hectares are burning, so the firefighters here are far from being relaxed, but so far it is under control. And how did we get here? So what they did is they took out the old military maps of this training ground, which has the forest on it, and they looked at where the passages went through this forest back in the days. And obviously they were wildly overgrown by now, so the military came in and pushed through these passageways and created paths for the firefighters that then came in afterwards. So they created a circle around the burning flames, and this circle is now secured, and they're basically waiting for the flames to extinguish by themselves inside this circle.
Now, one factor making this kind of fire so dangerous and so hard to tackle is the presence of unexploded munitions left over from war games in World War II. This is a problem in many parts of Germany. What are authorities doing about it?
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. A lot of people are not obviously talking about Luptin, the wildfires here, and the ammunition problem. But there are around 175 areas only here in the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern contaminated with ammunition. And just to give you an idea, there's 30,000 hectares of forest land contaminated, and that represents about 10% of the forest area here in the region. So on a national level, politicians start to realize that there is a problem, but it will cost hundreds of millions to get rid of this ammunition. And it's not only a financial problem, it's also a time problem, because it's very time consuming to get rid of them. So by now they haven't really proposed any concrete solution, but at least they are aware of this problem by now.
Tessa, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Tessa Walter in Luptin. Soccer now, and the defending champions of the Women's World Cup, the United States, have reached the final match after a dramatic 2-1 win over England. All the goals came in the first half, but most of the drama came close to the final whistle.
The United States have been quick out of the blocks at this World Cup. Against England, it was no different. 10 minutes in, they took the lead. Kristen Press ghosting in at the back post. The shock replacement for Megan Rapinoe justifying her place in the side. England could have been overawed, but they hit back soon after. Ellen White with the perfect poacher's goal. Number 6 of the tournament. But anything she could do, so could birthday girl Alex Morgan. Her superb header finished off a lovely team move. Morgan cheekily celebrating her 30th in a very English way. If that had England choking on their tea, they were positively crying into it by the end. The video referee, having earlier chalked off a goal for offside, helped deem this a penalty. Up stepped captain Steph Houghton. She missed. The US breathed a sigh of relief, though they were the deserved winners.
And DW Sports correspondent Oliver Moody joins us now from Lyon, where the dramatic match took place. Ollie, the favourites, the US, are through, but they really had to work for it, didn't they?
They certainly did, yeah. In the initial stages, it actually looked like they might blow England away. They started with that kind of ferocious pace and power that we've become so used to seeing from the US in the opening stages of games. They just dominated the opening exchanges and deservedly took the lead. But England did very well to break that US spell of dominance and level the scores. And after that, the match actually took place on a very kind of even footing. The two teams were very evenly matched, and England, as we saw, could even have equalised towards the end. But of course, the US has so much quality in that team, and Alex Morgan is one of the world's best strikers, and she proved it again on the biggest stage, the World Cup semi-final.
Now, England came so close to tying the match with a penalty. What was the atmosphere like in the stadium at that moment?
It was very tense. I was sitting mostly around Americans at the game, and they were very loud throughout the match. But when the referee went over to the video screen to check the replay of that incident, they went very, very quiet. And they stayed quiet right up until Alyssa Nair pulled off the save that ultimately put the US into the World Cup final. A huge moment for them, a hugely disappointing moment for England, of course, and it wasn't the only one. They also had a goal disallowed for a very fractional offside. Ellen White again coming close, of course, to getting on the score sheet again. So 2 moments there that will hurt the England players for years to come, I'm sure, even if they are rightly very proud of their performances at this tournament. Now, we heard from Lucy Bronze, the England right back, after the game. Let's hear what she had to say about those 2 moments.
Obviously, the keeper's made a great save for the penalty. We had a VAR decision, offside and offside. We're not going to argue with that, but you know, these are the fine lines in football. And in a semi-final of a World Cup, I think we pushed USA right to the edge. You know, even at the end of the game, we still looked in it, even with 10 men. But unfortunately, that's the way football goes.
That's the way football goes, indeed. Ollie, the defending champions, though, are in the final again. Can they be stopped?
I think they can. I mean, they still look like the best team in the world at the moment, and they've proved that really by beating some very tough opposition, the likes of England and France, of course, the hosts in the quarterfinals. They've also beaten Sweden already at the tournament, one of the other teams left in who play in the semi-final against the Netherlands. But look, the US, as I say, have taken the lead early on in every game so far. They've scored in the opening 12 minutes of every single game they've had at the World Cup so far. So the key for whoever plays them in the final is to keep them out for that opening kind of stage, that opening stretch of the game. And if they can do that, then ultimately they're not at a disadvantage from such an early stage, and they've got a chance of beating the best team in the world.
From Lyon, Oliver Moody of DW Sports, thank you so much. In Chile and Argentina, tens of thousands of people watched in awe as the sun vanished behind the moon in a total eclipse. The 2 countries are the only inhabited places on Earth where the rare sight could be seen. The eclipse could be seen from the South Pacific to South American continent, 11,000 kilometers away. Coming up next, it's Business News with Ben Fazulin. You're watching DW News from Berlin. Thanks for being with us.